Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Let's Talk About Suicide. And today I've got Sue Williams, an incredibly experienced person. We're very lucky to have you here because I know you're super busy, Sue. So thank you for joining me. I know about your background and what you do now. It would be great if you could introduce yourself to the listeners.
Hi. Hello, Nikki. Really nice to see you again. So, Sue Williams, as you say, I've had the privilege, and I mean that word, I've had the privilege of being a hostage negotiator now for 35 years, 35 long years. As you know, former head of the hostage unit at Scotland Yard and also the kidnap unit. What else about me? Still working, mostly these days within the NGO sector. A lot of people are thinking, apart from the Middle East, nobody's getting kidnapped, and I expect you're not very busy. Well, actually, within the humanitarian sector, a lot of their locally employed staff are being taken, and that's what's keeping me busy at the moment. So, really pleased to be here with you and help wherever I can.
Thank you so much. So the purpose of this podcast is to help those people that are helping people, those families and friends who perhaps have a friend or a family member and they're noticing a difference in their behavior, or they're noticing that they're self-harming, and they want to open up the conversation and talk about suicide and talk about, are you thinking of taking your life or hurting yourself, but just not sure how to do that. And so we're sharing tips from a variety of sources of how they can open that conversation, have that conversation, close the conversation, walk away from it, set boundaries, whatever that might be. So I'd be really interested if you could share a story and some of the things that you have learned over the incredible 35 years of your negotiation career, and things that have worked for you, things that haven't. Now, I know that people are different. We're all emotional human beings, and some things that work with one person don't work with another, but just how to open up the conversation and be brave and courageous, really.
Yeah. I think I'll probably start with a few do's and don'ts, if that's okay, with what I've learned. When you are looking to open up that conversation, perhaps some of your listeners will have time on their side. Sometimes, as you know, when we've crawled up that ladder or climbed onto that rooftop, we've not had time to prepare. So what I would say is, if you are going to broach this subject and you have got time on your side, then make the most of it, use it, and prepare for it. And there's lots of things you can do around preparing for that. But that is a luxury that suicide intervention negotiators just don't have time to do. Mm-hmm. So I guess let's start with some of the do's. A good opening line can sometimes be like, I hear, or I see, or I notice, or I feel, and I care. So focusing on those sort of positive words about you. So it's putting the dairy on you a little bit, isn't it? It's nothing about they've done, but it's focusing in you. Do you want to talk is a lovely, do you want to tell me about it? It's a lovely big open question. You can harvest in a lot. And then you identifying how they're feeling, getting that emotional connection. So how are you feeling right now? Please allow me to help. I want to help. Let me help you. Those are all things which are taking the onus off of them to give in to you, as it were. Do you want to share? They're all great phrases. Now, those are things that I would say are good openers. Mm-hmm. This is the don't do's, okay? Don't get muddled up. So that was the do's, these are the don'ts. You're not going to do anything stupid, are you? Now, that really is a stupid thing to say. And don't ever dare anybody to do anything or suggest that they wouldn't do it, or you've not got the guts to do it, or you've not the bottle. Don't ever do that. Do not say, do you know, I hear this sometimes in conversation, and it's a trigger for me. I know how you feel, and I understand. They are not helpful statements, because actually you don't know the full context, the full picture, and what rights have you got to understand? Because somebody has to give you that right, so you don't do that. It will pass, move on, get over it. I know someone that happened to. They're all phrases to actually avoid. And again, don't make it about you. Focus on them, and you're just there to be a help and support, but it's not about you. So I think there's some do's and don'ts. Mm-hmm. You asked me what I've learned about doing this, the aspect of suicide intervention, more so than negotiation, really. First of all, it's a conversation. it's a difficult conversation, and it's a high-risk conversation. But that's what it is, a conversation. So don't forget that. It's nothing more than that. It's very intense. To some people, it's the most important conversation that they're ever going to have in their life. It takes energy. It takes energy on both sides. And the interactions between human beings, they can be complex anyway, can't they? So then if you add the threat that somebody wants to take their own life, the backdrop, if you like, it can make these conversations energy sapping, intense, and quite honest. Sometimes I think they're the most honest conversations I've ever had. So that's the type of conversation. But I think what's important is to remember, you've got to choose your words carefully, obviously. This is the time to really focus on what you're saying. But I think it's quite important that you try and anticipate how the words will be received, not how you intend them. The receiving of the words is so much more important than what you meant to say. So really look and think. Don't look at it from your point of view. Look at it from how it's going to be received, and look at it from their point of view. I think don't rush to problem solve. I've had to learn, and it took me some time, I've had to learn the difference between helping and fixing it. And you can't rush to fix it. So recognize there's a difference between a help and actually fixing it. And I think it's a schoolgirl error, really, to paint those sunny uplands. It's all going to be all right. That's not really great. So don't just paint the sunny uplands. That won't work. But that said, as you know, reframing is really important, and we can reframe, but just be really careful about going over the top of that. I think also you have to listen out for the triggers. You have to listen out what might make things a bit worse, but what might make things a bit better. And then when you talk about the positive things that were a positive trigger, have some energy and some excitement in their voice when you talk about the two. You use your voice, because your voice is so important when you're deciding on that. What else would I say? Reinforce that they're not going through this alone, that you're by their side and this is a joint venture. And then you have to work at trust. You might think they trust you, but you really have to work at it to make sure. And then throughout the whole of your dealings, you have got to ooze trust. You have really got to make them 100% sure that they can trust you in some way. You've got to clarify and validate their concerns. Please don't minimize them, because even if you think they've got a distorted view, that's their reality. And that's what you have to deal with, is their reality, how they see the situation. So you have to try and understand that, minimize their fear, do some de-escalation, but you have to live in their head and not yours. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Seeing the world from their perspective.
Totally, yeah. Get your feet in their shoes and look at it through their eyes. And don't judge it. Don't judge it by your own standards or your own values or your own experiences, because it's not helpful in some way. I think sometimes people, I think they have to feel a way to acknowledge. And this is where we can help, because we can help them find their way. They have to find their way to acknowledge their identity. They have to understand their contribution, how important they are. They sometimes have to understand the future, and also what they mean to other people. And I just don't mean the people who love them, but their wider circle and their community. They sometimes don't always understand that. So you help them find their way to realizing those really, really important aspects of life in some way. Just being there is the first brilliant step, because you are preventing any de-escalation. But you have to be there physically and mentally. You have to be in that moment with them. This is not the time to be thinking about something else. They have to get all your attention in some way. What else would I say? Everybody knows that our world is not about being a fancy wordsmith. It's not about having the right words. It's about listening. It's about doing proactive listening. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and there's probably a reason for that. So you should be focusing on the listening, being in the moment. But we need to ask questions, obviously, but they have to be gentle questions. And they need to be open questions. Yes or no is not going to be that helpful. So use those gentle, open questions. Building empathy. Empathy is like, it's the lubrication of all negotiation. So we have to work towards, and what I would suggest is to identify how can I use empathy to create an emotional connection. And that's what you're going to need in these type of difficult conversations. Once you're in it, you are going to need an emotional connection, because once you have that, people are far more likely to listen to you and hopefully take you seriously and hopefully be with you and understand and do what you say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So having that empathy, getting the trust, being in the moment, no judgment, no bias, not making it about you, making it all about them, and then build those little steps a bit by bit. And I'm just going to take you back to the beginning of the conversation, Sue, where you said about preparation, that if you're going to address this difficult conversation, prepare yourself for that. And what would you suggest people do to prepare for that conversation?
First of all, select the time and the place. The time, the place, the frame of mind. The frame of mind, I would suggest, of both parties. That's really, really important. And then I would, in preparation time, I would think about what's the predicted dialogue? What do I know they are possibly going to say? What's the worst thing they could say to me? What do I say if they reject me in some way? So have those questions written down, not to take in with you, but just as your part of preparation, and then work out 2 or 3 really good answers if they say those phrases, so that you are prepared, and that gets you thinking. Also, as preparation, I'm a great believer in this. I put myself in their shoes. What is this situation looking like to them? Because that's how you're gonna help. You're not going to help with your experiences, your worldview, your judgment. So just trying to imagine in preparation time what it looks like to them. And then I would probably have ready, just in case you were lucky to get this far, any support services or people that can help. Just have that, do a bit of research and have that information ready. I guess that's what I would do in preparation. Obviously, it would be dependent on the individual. But if you knew them really well, then write a list of the good times. Paint a picture of the good times. And you might have to be a bit selective around that, obviously, but look at the good times and then things to avoid. What's not going to be good to mention, and hopefully don't get the two muddled up.
Lovely. And like you said, that negotiation, talking to people in crisis, is a series of conversations. I was always taught as a negotiation, that negotiation is just a conversation with a purpose, and having that preparedness, that purpose of the conversation, and not trying to fix everything in one go. It doesn't have to be a conversation that lasts for hours and hours. It's just broaching that subject, putting it out there, letting the other person reflect on it, and those lovely big open questions that you talked about earlier. Do you have a story that you can share with the listeners about how this worked in a particular scenario?
I was thinking about something that would be worthwhile, and there's a reason for I picked this story, and I hope you'll think it's relevant, because I think, and I'll explain at the end what I think is relevant, so bear with me. It does have a happy ending, so please, nobody listening to this and think that it's going to have a sad one. It doesn't. I'm going to go back to one really, really, really hot, balmy night in June, a few years ago now, many years ago now. I think it was around midnight, and I got called to the UCH, the University College Hospital, which at the time, it's a very old hospital, and at the time it was having this massive big extension, this big wing, this big modern building was being bolted onto a very old one. And it was a building site, really. That's all it was, a building site. But it was like a frame of girders, because it was obviously the beginning of a building site. It was like a big frame of girders. So I went to the location, and in the street, my uniformed colleagues were there. They explained that there was 30-something man who was on the top girder, and that he was threatening to jump. So they explained to me, in their opinion, the female officer amongst them had much better rapport with him, and she was up there now sort of talking with him. So after quite a quick briefing, and not much preparation really, because that's how these things work, I climbed up to what was then the top floor, but it isn't now. Now it's a big, fully functional hospital, but at the time this was the top girder, because there weren't even floors there actually. This was the top girder. And I was supported by a fellow hostage negotiator who was on call with me, and he came up really to assist me. But between us, we agreed I would start off because of what the colleagues had told us. So he was there to keep me safe as well. That would be one of his remits. So once up there, I saw a man straddled, like as if he was riding a horse. He was straddled in a sitting position on a girder, but it was the end girder adjacent to the side of the building. So he was actually looking down to his left, which was the Euston Road for anybody who knows London. And so immediately I sort of realised that this was quite high risk because of the height, because of the way he was sitting. I'm not a great lover of heights myself, but I sort of got used to it over the years. So I was really worried about him really sort of sliding over to his left and falling, really, either deliberately or accidentally. And I was worried about getting too close in case I spooked him, and I really didn't want to do that. So, as you know, we do the usual introduction, myself and my colleague. I showed my open arms, my open palms, and explained that I was there to help, to reassure him, and to tell him I would be staying put. How far away was I? About 5 meters. About 5 meters from him, I would be staying put, and there would be no surprises. And I wanted to listen to him, and I wanted to hear his story. I think I remember that he had been drinking, but he definitely wasn't drunk. And that's quite an important judgment to make, really, when you're talking to someone in these situations. So it took a little while for him to open up. But in essence, his situation was that his childhood sweetheart had ended the situation that morning, and that he was now homeless, loveless, and he couldn't see any future. He couldn't see any happiness at all. I think he felt that his whole world had changed, and that there was no point in going forward. It'd obviously been a very, very long relationship that the two of them had. I do recall, actually, now thinking about it after you asked me, I do recall that there was a bit of a hint of revenge. I was picking up a bit of a whiff that he wanted to hurt the woman as well. And that's really important for negotiators to note if there's any sign of that. But I did pick that up. I would say over the time we were together, he did most of the talking. His replies were very quick, and they were not really thought through. It's almost as if he said the first thing that came to his head, into his head. There were highs and lows of crying and anger. And I was totally focused on watching him, watching his body language, doing the proactive listening, trying to build empathy, just totally in that zone and totally focused. Totally in that zone and totally focused. Obviously, I was choosing my words carefully. I was de-escalating, and I was staying with him, both physically and mentally. I don't know if this happens to you, Nikki, but sometimes in those situations, I have a voice in my head, and it's saying, I wonder if he's serious. I wonder if this is a cry for help or just some attention seeking. But I really must stress, you never, ever, ever listen to that voice. You completely disregard that voice, because it's really important that you treat every case as if it is a genuine attempt at somebody ending their life. So I have to get rid of that little voice that was in my head. Also, time is quite elastic. You have absolutely no concept of time when you are engaged in this conversation, and you can't really look at your watch, can you? Because it's a bit of a bad look, really. So you don't know what time it is. But at some point, I think it was around 4:30 a.m. That's a bit later. I'm not sure. But hands up, I suddenly lost a bit of focus and concentration, and I was just suddenly aware of this most amazing sunrise. My eye contact had gone from him. I'd sort of straightened up a little bit, was exercising my neck and just really reminding myself where I was. And the sunrise had come up, and it was really all of a sudden quite awesome. It was June, it was very hot, it was lovely. And my mind began to wander off, which is not helpful, really, is it? My mind began to wander, and suddenly I noticed all the roofs, and some of the roofs were red, and some of the roofs were like a burnt orange. And I was just looking. I'm a very proud Londoner. I was born and bred in London. It's my city. I love this city. So I remember thinking, oh, how privileged and lucky am I? And I started to think about the people under the roofs and what sort of day they would be having. And so for the first time, I left eye contact with him. I'm now looking away from him, and he actually gets my attention. And he actually says something. And I know that we use silence as leverage, don't we? But to be honest, Nikki, this was not intentional. So I was using the silence tactic, but actually it was because of the distraction. Anyway, he said something, and I looked back at him, and really with genuine passion, and I've written it down. Hang on a second, I wrote it down with genuine passion. I did actually say to him, "Please do not tell me you want this to be." No, sorry, I'll start that again. "Please do not tell me you want this beautiful sunrise to be your last. Look at it." And I pointed. But he just went quiet. And that was interesting because that was the first time he had totally been quiet after I had said something. He just went really quiet. And I held the silence. And trust me, I was ready to say something profound after that, but I didn't. I totally kept mum in some way, held my thoughts. And then he looked at where I was pointing, and he just said, "Okay, let's go down." And I summoned some help because I was worried his legs had gone to sleep, and I was worried now we'd have an accidental fall.
Yeah.
And so I summoned up some help, and we got him down, and then we're very quickly on the pavement. And of course, as you know, the important thing to do is to remind them they've not done anything wrong.
Yeah.
But the reason that I chose that story is because despite all my training, despite all my experience, despite all the manuals, that was a comment, human being to human being. It was purely that and nothing else. And that question I gave him, honestly, was not a conscious question. It was not. I didn't craft it. I didn't put it together. It wasn't on my written notes. And so the reason that I've chosen that is it doesn't take the training, the manuals. It can just take a passion and an intent to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that story. So, because the reality of it, that human aspect of that connection with somebody in a moment when they're at their deepest, darkest place, and you have a shared experience. It's weird because you have a shared experience. You had a shared experience of that sunrise, which you were then able to just say to show him. And in that moment, because of that connection, that humanity, that sharing of something special in a moment in time, and this is one of the things about crisis negotiation that I always find fascinating is you're sharing a moment in time with somebody.
Yeah. But I'd like to tell you it was all very clever thinking on my part. And I'd like to tell you that the silence and the structured question was all thoughtful. But I'm going to be honest, it truly was not. It just came from my heart and my head and what I was thinking. And that's what people can do.
Yeah, exactly that. It's about that genuineness, that openness, that honesty, that human connection, that sharing that moment with somebody, not trying to fix it, not trying to fix them, not trying to judge them. Like you said, you put your judgment to one side. You're very honest around that. And I think people will take a lot from that story because,
I hope so.
Yeah, when we relate that to everyday, you relate that to everyday world. And actually, sometimes it is just being with somebody.
It is. But you have to be authentic, don't you?
Yes, you really
Authenticity. Do. This is not a place to wing it, and it's not a place to be image over substance. It truly isn't. You have to be authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. Because people will see through your authenticity, and it's about being real, kindness and respecting and allowing them a moment.
And once they do see through it, you're no help. You're no help.
Yeah, in fact, you'll never get trust, will you? Once they see through it, if you're not
trust is a bit like a glass. Once it's broken, it's never the same, is it?
No, it's not, and very, very difficult to put back together, as you say. Never the same. You have shared so many great things there for our listeners to take away with them. Your story of what it was like, how we can use that now in everyday life, but your do's and don'ts at the beginning as well. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for your time. As always, if you're listening to this, if you've been affected in any way, we will put the contact numbers of the services that are available to you that you can ring or text. And thank you for listening. And thank you again, Sue, for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Nikki.
If you have in any way been affected by today's podcast episode, there are numbers at the end of the transcript which you can contact. We'd like to thank you all for listening. And if you'd like to join our Facebook group, there is also a link to that in the notes that go with this podcast. Have a great day.